Very excited for our next guest. I've been pushing voting, y'all. I've been pushing voting, and we're having some candidates coming on this week. He is currently the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, and he is running to be Senator of Wisconsin. He is challenging Ron Johnson. It's so great to have him on. Mandela Barnes, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself? I want to thank you so much for having me on and pushing everybody to get out there and vote.
Oh, my gosh, I've been pushing it nonstop. So listen, let me start here, sir. I'm in the barbershop this weekend. And a clip of you comes on in the barbershop, and you say something to the effect of your campaign is about giving people the idea that the American dream is for them. There's a young man sitting next to me, and he says, I'm not voting. I'm 30 years old. I can barely even afford this haircut. And I gave him the whole breakdown, Mr. Barnes, about, democracy is at risk and what is at stake and how things can change. And I said I was going to be interviewing you. So he wanted me to ask you this question. What do you say to someone like him, who is not a Republican? He is a young Black man. He would vote Democrat if he was going to vote, but he wasn't hearing me. What's your response to a young man like him?
Well, my response is exactly what the clip stated. This is about making sure that people can have opportunity. Now, when I talk to young people who are disaffected all the time, I don't sit and I don't make excuses. I tell them, look, if you think things are bad, you have an opportunity to change things. And voting is just the first step. And a lot of times I'll go deeper into the conversation. I ask, well, have you ever been to a city council meeting? Have you ever been to a meeting where the decisions are made? Because you are more than welcome to be in those spaces. Like, you should show up and make your voices heard. And I'll also tell people that just because the person you wanted to get elected wins a race, can't just assume that the good things are going to happen on its own. And because a person you didn't want to win, you can't just let them off the hook easily. And also say that things can absolutely get worse than they are right now. But on the other hand, things can get better. And it's on you which direction we go. If you don't show up, I can promise you things will get worse. And this is more than just a vote for me as a candidate. This is a vote for yourself. This is a vote for your family. This is a vote for the people that are around you. There are folks who want to tear it all down and make life difficult for us. There are people who don't want to see working class people, like the folks who can't afford that $30 haircut. There are people who want to make it even harder for that to happen. There are people who are running, who are serving in office right now, who cannot be, or who cannot care less about how life and how things are going for individuals such as him. So if you want things to change, if you want something to get better, I get it. Things are rough, but either you want it to stay that way or you want it to get better. The way we make it better is to get involved in the process.
I always say, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. I always I always tell people that that's the real thing. So one thing I do like is that you have a plan to address Black maternal health. Ron Johnson has no plan like that whatsoever. Please speak to that. And what is your plan?
Absolutely. And the thing about Black maternal health, it is actually a very real crossover issue, especially here in Wisconsin. I mean, rural mothers and expectant mothers can't even get the care that they deserve. But we have a real crisis uh, in the state of Wisconsin when it comes to Black maternal health. And I think about my mother's story. She had a very complicated pregnancy before I was born, and she had to make the difficult decision to get an abortion. I mean, that was her choice to make. She talks about it, pretty not like just regularly, but she, since Dobbs came down, since Roe was overturned, she's been speaking about it. Now, with that being said, given the fact that her pregnancy was complicated, fortunately, she had good health insurance. But that's not the case for everybody. I think about the women who, miss appointments because they don't have health insurance, or the people who are scared to go to a doctor or feel like they have a distrust for the healthcare system in general. My mom was fortunately close to her OB, like they were, actual friends. So it was a little bit easier for them to have that relationship. But that's not the case for everybody. And so many people struggle and end up dealing with infant mortality issues once the babies are here. So we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to promote healthy pregnancies, and also to make sure that, when children do arrive, when babies do arrive, that they get all the care that they need, so they can, live a happy, healthy, and productive life. But it seems like it's been forgotten about. It's been swept under the rug. You don't get enough elected officials talking about it. Fortunately, we got Congresswoman Gwen Moore, who's been an absolute champion, and she just needs some help to see her work all the way through, especially in the U.S. Senate.
For me, it's a disqualifier for me if you are a election denier, or if you have people in your team who are election deniers. And I wonder if you could address Ron Johnson. He recently he hired Trump's former lawyer, who was a part of this whole election fraud scheme thing. Republican or Democrat, that's very dangerous to me. If you could just speak to that and what that means he stands for.
I mean, that's who he is, and it's no secret, it's no surprise. We're talking about the same person who tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election because he didn't like the outcome. And for him to hire that same attorney is even further proof of who he is and who he will be if he's elected for another 6 years. And the reality is, fortunately, they didn't win in 2021, but we have to do everything we can to make sure that they don't win this year as well, because democracy is of very little concern to people like Ron Johnson. And if we want to stand up, fight for our rights, fight for our freedoms, that means we have to protect the democracy first, because if it falls, everything else goes along with it. It'll be pure chaos around here.
Absolutely. I have to ask you this. So there's been this whole conversation about cash bail. I'm from Philadelphia, and I know how horrible keeping somebody behind bars for this cash bail system can be. But they've turned it into the boogeyman conversation. And I can recall a couple of years ago, even Republicans were talking about how cash bail can really hurt communities. But now you're the cash bail boogeyman, and I see it all on you. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. But what is the balance? Because someone like me, of course, if you're a violent offender, then you should have a cash bail. But I think about Khalif Browder in New York. What is that balance between there is some kind of cash bail, but it's not the boogeyman conversation that Ron Johnson is doing. But we do find a way to fix this system that hurts so many poor people when they get in the system.
So a couple things on that conversation. One, it's so wild because I haven't had a conversation about bail for 7 years, right? This is a bill that was in the assembly. And the second part is they are being absolutely disgusting about how they're portraying it. They're using the Walker Straw tragedy,
Yeah.
and they are re-traumatizing families. They're making them relive the most difficult moment they have ever experienced in their entire lives. And they're playing this stuff over and over on commercials. The other part to that is the Waukesha perpetrator got out under current law. It is the current system that we have in this state that's broken. My proposal never became law. My proposal didn't even get a public hearing. And the reality is, this is about keeping communities safe. And under my proposal, that person wouldn't have been able to get out if he paid $1,000 or $100,000 because he had a violent criminal past. He would have been in jail for a violent crime that he was accused of committing. Now, with that being said, the current law lets people out based on ability to pay. And this is what I brought up during the first debate between myself and my opponent, was that he probably never ran into a problem he couldn't buy his way out of. So he just simply cannot understand the complications when it comes to bail reform. He is a person who clearly is either misleading people intentionally or doesn't know what he's talking about. And either way, it's disqualifying.
Agreed. I know you have a tight schedule, so before you go, I think receipts are so important. Give me 3 things that you passed or you were able to get through in your roles in government.
Yeah, so for the very first time, our state has a clean power plan that gets us to 100% renewable energy, that creates tens of thousands of good paying jobs in the process. In the assembly, worked across the aisle to lower the cost of chemotherapy drugs. And as Lieutenant Governor, our administration delivered historic investments into public education, the largest increase in education funding in the history of the state.
Love it, sir. I want to thank you. For coming on. Before you go, could you just give one more message to the non-voters out there? Those are the ones that I battle with on these airwaves sometimes. Just one more message to the folks who are registered, who are Democrats, but they're saying, I don't know, the economy, inflation, I don't know. I'm just not going to show up.
To the non-voter, there are people who need this election more than you realize. People that you don't know, people who are around you, people you may know, your family members, and it's for the future. For the non-voters who have kids, It's about what kind of world you want them to grow up in, what kind of world you want them to live in. Do you want them to have to live under the constant threat of gun violence? Do you want to have them have to worry about, what is going to happen in terms of climate change? Or do you want them to also be able to have, a decent quality of life? Right, all these things are on the line. Do you want your children to be better off than you are or not? If you want them to be worse off, then fine, sit out the election. But there are other children, other families who are living on the margin right now that need government to step up and act and get it right to help them out. And it's not going to happen if we continue down this road. It's not going to happen if people don't show up and vote.
Yeah, and also, when I was younger, we didn't have candidates like you. I always say this. This is not like my daddy's Democratic Party. We have candidates like you that are much different than when I was growing up. And no disrespect to the folks who came before us, but it's just a different Democratic Party. I call them post-Obama Democrats. And that's great to have those kind of options, but we got to vote them in. We got to vote them in. How can folks follow you and support you?
Yeah, people can go to mandelabarnes.com and you can follow me on social media at The Other Mandela.
I appreciate you, sir. Once again, Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin. He's running to be Senator of Wisconsin. Make sure you show up and vote. Has early voting already began in Wisconsin?
Early voting has started. We are in the second week of in-person early voting. So please get out there, make your voices heard. You get out there early, that gives you time to get other people to the polls.